Hello, everyone, and welcome to Faith Talk with Tia. It's been a great day. It's been a great week, and I've been thinking about a lot of things lately. And one of the things that come to mind just recently, because of some things that I've been confronted with, has been the word forgiveness. Sometimes we talk about forgiveness, and yet when it comes time to really manifest that, it's not something that comes easy for any of us. And one of the things that God tells us to do is to forgive. And a lot of times, I had somebody ask me just a few days ago, how do you know whether or not you've forgiven somebody? And that's a good question because I think that depends on each person. A lot of times when we say we forgive, most of the time it begins usually with a confession. Because let's just be honest, sometimes when we deal with having to forgive a person or a situation, usually it's based on beginning to say it because a lot of times we don't really feel like forgiving people, especially when we feel like whatever it is that we're holding and don't want to forgive them for is justifiable. Perhaps they've done something that was just really cruel. Perhaps you think about sometimes things that have happened in your life, even as a child, and you think about it and you feel like, hey, these people are gone now. Some of them are not even in your life. But when you think about some of the things that may have happened in your life that may have affected you, and there's something that still seems to tug at you or just feel some pain when you think about that person or that time or that situation, you begin to feel some feelings all over again. And a lot of times it's not because you've not forgiven, and sometimes it could be because you've not forgiven. Many times we don't want to deal with pain because things can be so painful and they can be so rooted in us till it's just too painful to go and visit, to touch it. And so I thought about a situation, I was like, okay, Lord, well, how do I know whether or not I've forgiven somebody? I've had a lot of things happen in my 56 years of life. Some have been great, some have been painful. And, you just say, well, it's over. It happened a long time ago. I forgive them. And yet and still, whenever I would think about the situation, just giving my own testimony, it would bring up just some uncomfortable feelings. And so I remembered a time, even when I was, I think maybe about in the third grade or something. How I can remember that far back, I have no idea. But sometimes we tend to remember things that happened bad in our lives much more clearly than we would something that was good in our lives. Sometimes we tend to draw to the negative, or sometimes we tend to draw to that which was harsh as opposed to that which was good. And I remember one time, just as a little girl, with my little two plaits, my pigtails, and everything. And me and some of my little friends were on the playground. I went to all-girl Catholic school. I'm sorry, I went to boy and girl Catholic school. The all-girl Catholic school came later. But anyway, we were running around the playground with our little uniforms on and just playing, games and everything. And all of a sudden, I went over to talk to some of my other friends on the playground. And I saw them choosing people for the game. They were going to play tag, I think. And I heard one girl said, she said, so-and-so you can play and so-and-so you can play. And when she came to me, she said, Tijuana, you can't play. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I just want to die. I felt so sad. I felt so rejected. I felt so hurt. And to this day, all these years later, I still remember that. I don't feel the pain as intensely. But there was a time several years ago that I did feel that pain. And when I would think about the young girl, I could see it as if it was again yesterday that said, Tijuana, you can't play. And the pain and the rejection that I felt, I just, I had to make up in my mind, I released this. I forgive her. Because I realized as the time went on, we played together later and all that kind of stuff. But I never really felt the same about that young lady after that incident. And of course, she probably doesn't remember. It was such a long time ago. But the devastation was real to me. I mean, I felt like, just drop me now. I mean, just fall into the ground, why don't you? And it hurt me. And I realized that I had to forgive her. And so I did forgive her in my heart, and I rehearsed that thing and I forgave her. And every time I would think about her, it would come up, I would say, I forgive you. Because in my opinion, I truly believe that confession brings possession. That after you confess something long enough, good or bad, happy or sad, that you will become possessing that very thing that you confess. And so I want to just challenge each one of you. At some point in your life, you felt like you've been hurt in some type of way. Have you forgiven? Have you really forgiven? Does something tug at you every time you hear that person's name? Does a fear rush through you or shakiness or anxiety hit you when you see that person? Or does anger rise up and you just, feel like, oh, I really don't care. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't bother me anymore. But does it really? Have you really forgiven them? I want you to think about that. And I want you to ponder that thing. And I want you to begin with a confession. I forgive her. I forgive him. I forgive that situation. Perhaps you were laid off of a job. Something happened that totally devastated you and took you off course. Choose to forgive today. You know why? Because it doesn't take them off the hook. It takes you off. And I once heard somebody say that, not forgiving somebody is like you drinking cyanide, something that will kill you, something as poisonous as that, and expecting somebody else to drop dead. It's really eating you up. And so I want to just say, listen, let's just do that together. Let's just make up in our minds with the help of the Lord, because we can't do it without him. And it has to first start with a confession. I forgive them. I forgive my childhood. I forgive my mom. I forgive my dad. I forgive my brother. I forgive that friend that hurt me. I choose to forgive because I want you to know I'm no longer where you left me. I'm going further in my life. And in order for me to do that, I've got to forgive. Amen? Amen. God bless you. Hi, I'd like to have a final word regarding our topic on forgiveness. Picture this. Someone makes a mistake publicly. I mean, they do something that's absolutely wrong, and it's all out in the public because depending on what status they are, what position they're in, or whatever title they may have. And let's just say you made the same type of mistake. You just happened to do it behind closed doors. And it's interesting how sometimes when we notice that other people have done the same thing that perhaps we've done, we're ready to take them to the stake, and just crucify them. But if we think for a minute, hey, perhaps I did the same thing. I did mine behind closed doors. Nobody really knows about it. But God knows about it. And aren't you guilty of the same? If you made the same mistake in private that someone else may have done openly, it's still a mistake, right? So when we're giving out, our little opinion about things, we all have one. Let's be a little gracious. Let's be a little gracious about the things we do. Amen? Let's think about it. It's time to forgive. God bless you.